That movie night here with a review for Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, the fourth film in the popular Pirates of the Caribbean series, starring Johnny Depp, Ian McShane, Geoffrey and Penelope Cruz. Set after the events of At World's End, the story follows Jack Sparrow, who arrives in London chasing up an imposter who is currently out looking for a ship and a crew in his name. In the process, of course, he runs into old acquaintances, including Joshua Gibbs and Captain Barbossa, though now Barbossa is in the employ of the British government. Sparrow soon discovers that the imposter is in fact his old girlfriend, Angelica, played by Penelope Cruz, and that eventually, after escaping from the British, she forces him onto Blackbeard's ship, and from there the race begins between the British and the pirates and the Spanish, who were informed first of the Fountain of Youth through a pair of fishermen who discovered an old man who claimed to be part of a crew that had tried to sail to the Fountain of Youth before. As always, we start off with the performances. All around, pretty good. Johnny Depp, of course, he's Johnny Depp. He's Jack Sparrow. He is who he is. I mean, do I really have to elaborate on what has been said about Jack Sparrow before? He's an enjoyable character. He comes onto the screen. He always has extremely bizarre yet always funny one-liners that always commentate ironically on the situation that he finds himself in. And of course, Johnny has great chemistry with the other actors, particularly Geoffrey as Barbossa. The two form a great double act, which is kind of interesting considering that these two are supposed to be mortal enemies. Penelope Cruz and Ian McShane do their usual good as the respective roles of Angelica and Blackbeard, with Blackbeard being perhaps one of the, well, I wouldn't say he's the best villain in the series, but he's definitely very reminiscent of what Barbossa was in the first movie. And he's given that his character has supernatural powers, which you probably guessed from the trailer, he's sort of like a hybrid of Barbossa from the first movie and, of course, Davy Jones from the second and third with the supernatural powers, which is interesting, and it's an interesting way to do Blackbeard. The rest of the cast is passable. No major Oscar-winning performances, though. Of course, as I mentioned, Kevin McNally returns in good form as Joshua Gibbs, and the only other real cast members to make a note of course, are Reverend, played by this young actor, I forget his name, and one of the mermaids, Cyrene. The two are essentially here to replace Kiera and Orlando, and while they're not doing horrible jobs, it just feels really shoehorned in, but I'll get to that later when I talk about the script. Needless to say, though, these two really don't have much purpose in the story, and though they're not terrible, there's nothing really that special about them either. They're just romantic couple in adventure movie 101. I mean, that's it. That's all they have to them. Of course, being a Pirate of the Caribbean movie, we need to talk about the set pieces and the special effects. Now, as with the other movies, these are actually pretty damn good, though, of course, as we all know, Rob Marshall is now in the director's seat, and while the fight scenes are a little more chaotic and less well shot than the ones by Gore Verbinski, I mean, Gore Verbinski is by no means a classic director, but let's be honest here, he had the fight scenes in the first three pirate movies nailed to a T. Rob Marshall tries his best, and although, as I said, it can be a little chaotic and they use a few more close-ups than is needed in the fight scenes, sort of like Batman Begins, it isn't too much of a problem, and I quickly got into it, and the fight scenes did their job. They weren't amazing, but they did their job. They added adrenaline and momentum. Set pieces, of course, and the locations were all really good. There was nice cinematography of the jungles when they went to the Fountain of Youth. The Blackbeard ship is very much akin to the Black Pearl from the first movie. It has a ghostly presence about it. It has a sort of supernatural feel to it. And of course the fact that it shoots fire out of the front, which doesn't quite make sense given the time period, but it looks cool, so I can give it that. And of course the special effects, although there aren't as many this time around because we haven't got the fish people, obviously scenes like the rigging coming to life and some of the fight scenes, they look good. They're obviously a lot of effort went into them. It's your typical good work. The score by Hans Zimmer, which is pretty much the same as the last three movies, and while they're not exactly up to par with the epicness of Cutthroat Island's soundtrack, they do their job. They're exciting when they have to be, they're funny when they have to be, and they have to be atmospheric when they have to be. So they do. So the soundtrack, while not memorable, does its job. And now on to the big point, as always, which is the script. Now, of course, in a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, they've become a little notorious for convolution in the storyline, adding more than is needed. And unfortunately, it comes back. But it's a lot less than the last two movies. I would say it's gone down by about 40-50% here. Obviously, part of the script is the Jack one-liners, and they work well. Johnny and the rest of the cast are having fun, so, you know, it works. It does its job, so that's all good. But back to the storyline. Unfortunately, there are more plots here than should be needed. I agree with my fellow critics when I say this should have just been erased. This should have just been the pirates and the British going after the Fountain of Youth. The problem is they added in the Spanish for no real reason here, except for a Deus Ex Machina. Now, of course, I'm not going to spoil what their final role is, but needless to say, it was really cheap how they were used. You know, I think you could have just as easily had the British go after the pirates. I mean, you know, heck, I mean, it's the British Empire, it's King George II. I think that Spanish or not, they would want to go after the Fountain Youth anyway, so Spanish really didn't have a purpose there. And of course, the big thing that everyone goes on about is the romantic couple of the Reverend and the mermaid. And I have to say, while in the context of the story that was being told here, the fact that they needed a mermaid tier, it kind of made sense. I still feel that the whole mermaid tier really wasn't needed. I mean, don't get me wrong, the main mermaid scene where the mermaids attack the pirates is pretty cool, and is another highlight of the film. It really, what happened after that with the Reverend falling in love with the mermaid wasn't needed 100%. It felt very shoehorned in, it wasn't very enjoyable, and it just really slowed down the movie. I mean, the movie has good pacing. I mean, it moves faster than At World's End, so that's a plus. And again, it's shorter than the last two movies. But, as I said, the fact that they threw in these completely unnecessary plot lines into this just really baffles me. It's like, what was so wrong about just making it being a race between the pirates and the British? Why was there this need to shoehorn in the Spanish and add this whole thing of the mermaid tier? And really, the mermaid should have been like, you know, something from an Indiana Jones movie in which they're there and then they go. That's it. That's how I see it personally. But I'm going to be honest here, it is better than the last two. I mean, unlike other people, I did not hate the last two. In fact, I enjoyed both of them. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're good movies, I'm just saying I enjoyed them. However, I can acknowledge the fact that plot lines were convoluted and messy. It's that, yes, it is faster and more streamlined, but it still has a couple of those niggling problems. I think that if they had cut out the mermaid subplot and the Spanish from this movie, it would have gone a lot faster and it would have actually made just as much more sense. So, after all said and done, I give Pirates of the Caribbean a bronze star. Yes, it still has a few bits and bobs that were not exactly the best things from the last two movies, but you know what, it's faster, it's leaner, and it gets more to the point than the last two films. This is not as good as Curse of the Black Pearl, but it's better than the last two, so take that for what it's worth.